Hello and welcome to the Three Will Podcast. This is your host, Danny Ryan, and I've got Tommy here with me as well. Hey, Tommy.
Good morning, Danny. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I wanted to take today and sort of go through what we heard about yesterday with the future of SharePoint. And first off, it's wonderful that SharePoint does have a future.
And it's very bright.
Yeah.
It's very bright. I'm excited.
And when I started seeing the little S in the Office 365 menu change over to sites, I was worried about SharePoint for a little while there.
Sure.
Like, are we going to start sort of, it's going to be in the background and it's just another commodity service? But it looks like they're going to actually call it SharePoint in the menu as well. I saw that yesterday, and that's good to see. And man, there was a lot of stuff introduced. What was at a high level? What were some of the big takeaways that you got from yesterday's event?
Well, what I saw is there's been a lot of experimentation in Office 365 where you see things like Delve and your personal profile on Delve, the cards in Delve, the blog capability for your personal blog in Delve. And it seems like they were experimenting with that and getting people's feedback and getting the usage of that and testing it out there, and that's starting to move over to be mainstream within SharePoint. For me, that's exciting to see that they're making investments, trying to improve it, innovating quickly, and then incorporating that into SharePoint, but not just putting it in SharePoint, but making it extensible in SharePoint. So I saw two sides of the coin. One is, let's make the user experience as simple as possible, and let's bring kind of best of breed concepts that are outside of SharePoint and other kind of platforms that have been helpful, test that out, and then bring it into the fold. And then give the developers the capability to do it as well as the SharePoint development team at Microsoft. So we're working off the same framework and using the standard technologies and tools out there, like Gulp and Git and Node.js and Angular, to take those things where those have matured over time and not come up with something different, but embrace what's out there that is in the mainstream. So as that continues to get better and innovates on its own cycle, we're not left in the SharePoint world building on 5-year-old tools and technologies, but we're using the latest and greatest. So some great things on both fronts. I think from the user front, in terms of cleaner, better UI that's mobile responsive, that takes into account some more advanced features that are simplified in the user experience, to the extensibility and the development capabilities that you have today and moving into the future.
One of the parts that I like is where they were talking about the different types of sites that SharePoint is addressing, like team sites, publishing, sort of recognizing that some people are using it for, more general, get the message out types of sites, for team collaboration, and then for apps. It was kind of neat to see them sort of recognizing how different folks are using SharePoint.
Right. Yeah, and I think that they've simplified that for the user, where there's two templates. There's the team site template, and then there's the publishing, versus having 50 templates to deal with or to choose from. And so they're looking at, what's the 80-20 rule of what are people really using SharePoint for? They're using it for a team site, or using it for kind of a landing page where they want to control the content there. And so I think that's a good thing. Also, what I saw, and I don't know if you noticed this, is I've seen a lot of innovation in the Office 365 groups. And as they were showing team sites, I said, I wonder if they're going to bring into the fold groups as a part of that team site experience. And they provision a group when you create that team site, which I thought was awesome, because that ends up giving you a really rich experience that you can follow that team site across the whole Office 365 platform, that this team site is not just this separate thing that just sits in SharePoint, but it blows out the infrastructure across the board on Office 365 to allow that team to collaborate and discover other people and discover content.
Yeah, you sounded pretty excited when that.
Yeah.
You sounded like you were you were glad to see that they had made that connection, which was cool. Some other things. What's the deal with? I guess with what we're seeing with Power Apps. I mean, we've heard of Power Apps before yesterday. And then this new, when I showed up this morning in my Office 365 menu, I saw Flow, and that was for me a new thing. What's with some of these new apps or what I'm not sure even sure what I should call them, but these new features that are coming out.
And I'm not the most well versed on those, but the way I look at it in my initial understanding is when you look at Flow is has some aspects of it like IFTT, if this then that, where you can take an event that ends up kicking off another action. It's very similar to me from a workflow perspective, where you can allow something to happen when a new document is added. What are the common things that I would do manually post adding a new document? What notifications would I want? So some of that capability that you saw in SharePoint Designer workflows, now you're getting capability on the multi-tenant Office 365 environment to do some lightweight workflow, and integration with other platforms and making that a little bit more point and click and WYSIWYG like.
Yeah.
And then I see the Power Apps is a way to launch over into Azure and have some customizations there that you can hook into, and so that's kind of the story I see as it relates to some of the custom applications that we build, can be as Power Apps. And then the SharePoint framework is where it gets exciting, where that's where we can do what have been web part development in the past, kind of customizations to the SharePoint kind of user experience versus something that's kind of side loaded to SharePoint. So that framework is something that we've been looking for. We've anticipated in some sense that had to come sooner or later, and now that is out there publicly, there's a roadmap, there's a vision there that we know that it's going to be in place, and as we build things, we can fit into that future of building things that will easily adapt to the SharePoint framework.
Now it's not out yet, but the SharePoint app, how excited are you about that?
I think that's nice. I think one of the things, when you would go browse SharePoint within kind of a mobile responsive UI that comes with SharePoint, or you'd use some of the apps that are out there, it was just overcomplicated.
Yeah.
It really didn't lend itself to a good user experience. And so I think as there is a sense of SharePoint, some commoditization of that, where you're trying to make it a simple, base experience. So having a team site and a publishing site versus having 30 templates. If that is, simplified and shrunk down, then some of your standard consumption of SharePoint, you can have richer apps that allow you to get to the content that you have there. So as you can see, the ability to go in and drive down to your content, or that content to discover you, the whole Office graph, where I'm interacting with you, I'm viewing certain documents, and all of a sudden it says, well, based on this relationship and the content you have, let's show you something else that might be of interest to you. So, with organizations, content is, you just think about how much electronic documentation that goes on in an organization, just even an organization our size, to have a technology, the machine learning that goes into building something like Delve, where that's getting integrated into your SharePoint experience versus going off to Delve.
Yeah.
I've been a big Delve proponent, and in our morning brews, I've been showing that every once in a while, but it's separate. So now they're taking some of those, rich experiences, baking those into the SharePoint experience, and then allowing that to surface all the way up to their native apps that you take on the go. So I think it becomes a good balance of what things that are held in tension, which is making it simple for the user, predictable for the user, easy to get going with it, kind of point and click and run, and you can use the platform with an extensibility story. And when you get into other products that are out there, SharePoint hasn't been as polished as other collaborative platforms. Now you're seeing that polish on the UI, but they're not abandoning, the developer capabilities, which that's tough to do. And so I'm excited to see how Microsoft is doing well and holding those two things in tension.
It was funny, you and I talking this morning about the mobile app experience and how this is quite similar to some of the things that we saw like from Jive, several years ago with the sort of the intranet on your mobile device, and I think it's one of those things I know we hear time and time again for the projects that we do. We cover what sort of mobile access do you have to this content, because it has become one of the most, almost arguably more important than your desktop.
Right.
How are people accessing this information, and for them to see it. I think we're seeing it in a couple of ways. One is, the recent improvements to the OneDrive app and accessing site content from that app, which you were showing me this morning. To just being able to go browse your intranet through your mobile device,
right,
and having a really nice experience with doing that. How that's really important to people.
Right. Yeah. To take it on the go.
Yeah.
We're such a mobile. We're in that mobile era that everything you want to do, you want to be able to access it from your mobile device. I'm looking at my son last night, and Alex is sitting there. We've got the TV on, but he's spending all of his time on this small, say 5-inch screen, consuming everything on the internet. And I've got this TV, large TV, and then I've got a laptop in my lap, and that the next generation consumes things on the go, and they want this one device to do everything. From taking pictures and video to being their phone to being their internet device.
Sounds like some good quality family time too.
Yeah.
Okay, how many screens does everybody have up in the room? When you have more, you've got more screens than people. That's awesome.
Right. I mean, that's a different podcast.
That's a different. That's a whole
go down that
I'm
path.
sorry. I'll leave that one alone. Any other, before we wrap up here? Any other things that you took away from yesterday's announcements at all?
A lot of exciting things. I think at the end of the day, all the background that we have with SharePoint is so relevant to continue to build into that investment in SharePoint that has that bright future.
Yeah.
And our challenge is holding in the ability to grow into all those new tools and apply the right technology at the right time along that roadmap.
Yeah.
And so we've got some folks that are very excited and very chomping at the bit for all these new tools. And we've been talking about Gulp and Yeoman and all those kind of buzzwords that you saw in the presentation, 2 and 3 years ago. With our 3-Will Labs effort, we were building things that looked like Delve back with popcorn.
Yeah.
And so we've been hungry for it, and now it's becoming a reality. So that's very exciting, and I think is going to re-energize us as a company to see, there's a bright future in SharePoint, which, there were times that you wonder, are we totally kicked out of building anything that's a custom experience on SharePoint, or is it becoming email and it's never going to be touched? It's going to be very plain Jane. That's all you get is SharePoint, a document library, and that's it. So we're excited, and I think our customers are going to see so much more value out of their collaboration experience, because there's so much that's coming with the platform as a starting point, and you're not stuck with what you get. It's extensible, and that's a great story.
Yeah, I love the any device. I love the fact that they're embracing other services as well.
Oh yeah.
That they're not just saying, hey, you need a pure Microsoft experience. I actually think that puts them in a better position for companies who might want to consolidate services, where they feel like they have the option of using other. I mean, it's one of those things. It's going to say, are you going to go to the world and say, consumer, you have to use all Microsoft services to play in our platform, or are you going to say you can? And just by taking that approach, it's almost like you're more open to their services because of that. So I'm glad to see them do that.
Yeah, I think Microsoft has swung that pendulum and swung it well. I don't think they're too far in the other direction. I think they've got a right balance of providing strong capabilities for their platform, but also going out there and building the best iOS apps out there, and allowing developers to use Mac OS and Visual Studio Code to build solutions. And provisioning Linux environments, they're very open. So they're really focusing on cloud first and services, and so I think Microsoft is heading in a great direction and showing that they can reinvent themselves, and that's hard to do for a company that size. So it's amazing to see.
Yeah, and I even see it with the services, like such a great support for like Salesforce, where you can tie into it, and they're not treating it like you can't access that data, and it's a more mature view of the world.
It is.
I think it's saying you know what, in the typical large enterprise, you're not going to have a pure environment. People are going to be. You have different departments, you have different teams, you have different reasons for using different products and services out there. Well, can we make all of these things work together better?
Yeah.
What a great
it's our mindset, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've integrated, we've created 12 different commercial integrations with SharePoint, because we believe it needs to be an integrated world. You need to be able to take best of breed and make it work well together.
Awesome. Well, this was great. Thank you for taking the time to do this. We definitely have some good material for follow-up podcasts, as well as we jump into some of the new products that are coming out. And anybody from Microsoft listening to this, good job yesterday. I think we're overall, you got us excited as a partner, and it was great to see that SharePoint really does have a future. So thank you for listening in. Thank you, Tommy, for being here.
Sure, Dan.
Absolutely. Everybody have a great day. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.